The North Celestial Pole, NCP, the fixed point around which stars in the Northern Hemisphere, including the Sun, appear to rotate, is discernible only at night. Inspired by the navigational strategies of some insects and birds, researchers devised a method for locating the NCP in daytime using skylight polarization, which occurs as atmospheric particles scatter sunlight. A polarimetric camera captures images of polarization patterns, which rotate as the sun's position in the sky changes. Temporal variances across images can then be used to determine an observer's latitude and bearing relative to the NCP. Which choice best describes the overall structure of the text? A. It illustrates how most navigational tools utilize the NCP, recounts how researchers discovered that certain animals are able to navigate without using the NCP, and then proposes that this discovery could be used to avoid problems in navigation associated with reliance on the NCP. B. It presents a celestial-based method of navigation, enumerates the comparative benefits of an alternative method used by certain animals that is based on an unrelated natural occurrence, and then indicates how researchers assessed the relative accuracy of the two methods. C. It explains how the NCP is typically located, emphasizes a key difference between how humans and certain animals use the NCP for navigation, and then suggests an alternative way of using the NCP to improve existing navigational instruments. D. It notes an obstacle to observing an astronomical phenomenon, mentions a navigational ability of certain animals that inspired a solution to that obstacle, and then explains how researchers used an optical device to mimic that ability.
So question number 7 is talking about the North Celestial Pole. And we have to observe what are the things which are mentioned point by point. So this first they are describing what it is, that is a fixed point around which stars in the Northern Hemisphere including the Sun appear to rotate. But for humans it's only discernible at night. So what we have done is, humans that is, inspired by the navigational strategies of some insects and birds, researchers devised a method for locating NCP in daytime also. So because humans are not able to locate NCP in daytime, so they are looking at insects and birds and they are trying to find some navigational strategies which they are using. So using daylight polarization, so they are using this daylight polarization which occurs as atmospheric particles scatter sunlight. So they are using this polarimetric camera which captures images of polarization patterns. So this polarimetric camera is able to capture images of polarization patterns. So this camera is capturing the polarization patterns, and why that is happening, because these are rotating as the sun's position in the sky changes. So these particles are scattering and they are getting rotated. These patterns are rotating because of that. And because of that, temporal variances across images can then be used to determine an observer's latitude and bearing relative with the NCP. Using this polarimetric camera, humans can now in the daytime also locate this North Celestial Pole. So which should we choose? The overall structure. So we should start eliminating the answers which are not correct. So in A illustrates how most navigational tools utilize. So most navigational tools utilize the NCP. That is not mentioned actually. Just one polarimetric camera is mentioned. How researchers discovered that certain animals are able to navigate without using, and then proposes that discovery could be used to avoid problems. So this doesn't seem to be correct. B says it presents a celestial based method of navigation, enumerates the comparative methods of an alternative method used by certain animals, and is based on unrelated natural occurrence. So all of this is not given at all. Alternative method used by certain animals, unrelated natural occurrence. So this is not how it is mentioned in the text. So B also doesn't seem to be correct. And C says it explains how NCP typically located, emphasizes a key difference between how humans and certain animals use the NCP for navigation, and then suggests an alternative way of using the NCP to improve existing navigational instruments. So this also, it does say that NCP is located, and how humans and certain animals use the NCP for navigation, that's not exactly mentioned. that is not the main thing of this. This is not how the text is structured. Whereas D, that is the best answer because it notes an obstacle to observing astronomical phenomena because humans are not able to see that NCP during daytime, and then mentions a navigational ability of certain animals that inspired a solution to that obstacle and explain how researchers use an optical device to mimic. So we can see that this photometric camera, that is the optical device because it is dealing with the seeing how the particles scatter sunlight and how the polarization patterns rotate as the sun's position changes in the sky. So D is the best answer. Choice D is the best answer because it accurately describes the overall structure of the text. The text begins by pointing out an obstacle to observing the astronomical phenomena of NCP. The NCP is visible only at night. The text then indicates that, inspired by the ability of some insects and birds to navigate using visualization of polarized sunlight, researchers devised a way to locate the NCP during daylight. The text then indicates that the researchers mimicked the insects and birds' polarized light visualization capabilities using a polarimetric camera. Thus, the text notes an obstacle to observing an astronomical phenomena, mentions a navigational ability of certain animals that inspired a solution to that obstacle, and then explains how researchers used an optical device to mimic that ability. So, this is the best answer. The rest don't have it.
Choice A is incorrect. Although it's reasonable to conjecture that humans have used the NCP for navigation, the text doesn't indicate this is the case, let alone that the NCP is relevant to a majority of navigational tools. Furthermore, the text doesn't state that researchers discovered that insects and birds navigate without the NCP. Rather, it indicates that it's known that some animals navigate by using skylight polarization to locate the NCP during the day, and that this knowledge inspired the method the researchers devised. Choice B is incorrect. Although it's reasonable to conjecture that humans have used the NCP for navigation, the text doesn't state that this is the case. Furthermore, the text discusses how some animals' use of navigational strategies based on the same celestial occurrence served as the inspiration for the researchers' polarized light approach, not as the basis for comparison of the relative effectiveness of animal and human methods of navigation. Choice C is incorrect. Although the text implies that humans have typically been able to locate the NCP visually at night, and indicates that some animals use the NCP to navigate, the text doesn't state that humans use the NCP for navigation. The text therefore doesn't emphasize a difference between how humans and animals use the NCP for this purpose. Furthermore, the text doesn't suggest that existing navigational instruments will be augmented with polarimetric technologies.